very happy to be joined as we continue the show here by Jared Ball, who's a professor of communication studies at Morgan State University, also one of the fantastic personalities on Black Power Media, one of my favorite new media collectives. There are people out there saying that there is only one channel, Roland Martin, that's producing daily content, Black News producing daily content. That is false. Black Power Media producing daily content, and it's not just going into one person's pocket, collectively run. Jared, thank you so much for being with us. Oh, you're muted.
My bad. I was just saying free wine.
All right, that's got to go in lower thirds. That's got to go in lower thirds.
Well, you know, Jared, I wanted to start here, obviously, with the controversy around Sha'Carri Richardson now banned from the Olympics. I mean, not only because of her 1-month ban is she banned from the 100-meter dash, almost at 100 yards there, but from what I understand, she was also not chosen for by the 4x100 relay. There have been a lot of takes on this. Joe Biden saying, well, the rules are the rules. I've seen a number of people pointing out how it's deeply hypocritical since CBD oil is all allowed and many of these runners who are going to be in the Olympics are promoting it. You know, obviously, this seems like a drastic double standard. Is it possible I could be off base with that, or is that right?
Well, first of all, I just hope that the rules and regulations for guests on Breakthrough News are not as stringent as those for participation in the Olympics.
What does that mean?
I just hope that that's the case, and I appreciate that.
I like where this is going.
Clarify.
I like where this is
I just
going.
want to start there. But I mean, obviously, and I mean, first of all, not only did Joe Biden say that, but I just was reading as I was waiting to come on here, unfortunately, that the in many circles, the beloved Dominique Dawes has apparently chimed in and said the same thing.
What?
That she said rules are rules. Yeah.
I'm looking this up right now. What?
She was on with Cuomo on the perfectly legit and above board and whatever Cuomo show or whatever to talk about this. But she apparently said that rules are rules. And then she went on to make an equally absurd comparison, saying that back when she was competing, apparently, and by the way, also to get a shot in on China, that the Chinese had apparently been flouting age restrictions in gymnastics, allowing for young, I don't know, and Dominique says that it made it harder for people competing on her team to make it to the podium. So she's equating, and you all have already pointed out, marijuana is not going to be a performance enhancer, and certainly shouldn't be compared to some alleged, conspiracy to sneak in underage gymnasts. Then it also made me think, so women can't compete for the United States if they smoke marijuana, but they can be allowed to compete or be forced to compete if they suffer what many gymnasts and Dominique Dawes' own colleagues had to suffer at the hands, literally, pun intended, unfortunately, of people running that program. So, I mean, it's like, so women can be battered and abused and go through that and then say, well, get out there and flip and perform. But if you suffer a loss and smoke a joint, well, now you can't be seen as being a legitimate representative of the United States, as if this is what would sully the reputation of this country around the world. So, I mean, it's just, there's so many, anyway, it's just ridiculous.
No, I hear you. And it's like the drug war logic behind it. I was so upset even at her. I mean, I understand why she felt the need to apologize, but I was like, you don't need to justify yourself. I mean, obviously, she was facing a terrible situation. Her mom had just passed. But, I mean, I don't care if you were just hanging out. I mean, the idea that somehow, and if we're going to keep talking about Joe Biden, let's let it be known, he said during the campaign trail that he was going to remove marijuana as a Schedule I narcotic, which is totally absurd, has yet to do so. He has unilateral power to do so. But it's like the very fact that marijuana and heroin are both in the same, and this is not to say anything negative. I think obviously we have to look at drug prohibition, period. But it's just like this idea that somehow she had done something really bad or really wrong. It just took me back to like the cartoons in Dare class or whatever in terms of how it's pushed forward. And just how so much of that, despite Jared, how allegedly advanced we are in this question, and allegedly everyone's so woke now, and that controls the world, and we're changing everything. We got progressive prosecutors. You know, this young woman who's done nothing wrong is forced to, you know, apologize as if somehow she bulldozed someone's house for no reason.
Well, to me, that was the response of the so-called people in your camp that are saying, you know, you got to think about the next round. You got to think about future endorsements. You got to think about, that's the way initially. Like, why? Of course, she shouldn't apologize. And of course, she shouldn't be made to, you know, to. First of all, I kept thinking also, you know, I'm sure I'm sure I wanted to say at least half of the people judging her had smoked that morning or earlier that day or were high at the time.
Yeah.
I mean, the amount of hypocrisy in this is just is really, really trifling and absurd. Or if they weren't smoking weed, they were drinking liquor, popping a pill, you know, maybe messing with the needle. Who knows? There's a lot of bougie, you know, that walk around with these fancy kits. I mean, so there's all kinds of stuff going on, and then they're going to sit in judgment and shut her down, and then find the Dominique Daweses of the world who will co-sign this. As opposed to athletes who should be brought out and you know, reminding folks what these folks are going through, what their lives are really like, and what it takes to get to where she got, and why it shouldn't matter that she did this.
Jared, I'm curious, how much of this do you think is, we talk about leniency or lack thereof, how much of this is related to race and gender?
Well, everything for me is through those lenses and others, and I would add class. Because if she's presented as, I mean, some might even argue, not to play too much of this game, but some might even argue if she was a fairer skin, if she had more conventional hair, so to speak, if she didn't have that sort of flamboyant, you know, hoodness about her, and that desire to speak for herself, that upbeat has been called historically. I mean, I think a lot of these things are certainly playing a role in this, and this is why, again, I think, you know, again, I'm really bothered, and I keep bringing it up, obviously, this Dominique Dawes intervention here, because again, you who better to be able to speak to what this woman has really had to go through, and yet you're going to come out and suggest that she had to follow rules. Obviously, this country is considering not only for the product endorsements that are important to all of this, but just sort of the national branding. They want to be able to send elements of their colonized communities and say, here, look, we have them performing for us too, but only up to a certain point, and certainly within a certain context and in a certain way. So I think all of those things, certainly race, gender, class, her performance, her attitude, so-called, and all of this stuff plays a role in this. And had she been maybe quote unquote well-adjusted in any of those areas, maybe she would have seen a different response. But to me, this is ultimately, and I'll just stop here, I think a great reminder of why I think all of us should sort of reset our relationships to these projects, to these, and I don't mean this in terms of athletes who are brought up from childhood to see this as the pinnacle of their career, but for the rest of us as communities in struggle to say, what is our relationship to all of these events, and why would we want our children representing any of this, and why would we want to participate in supporting any of this? And then now we're being asked to come back and support the Olympics in spite of this, and to support the existing participants, and it's a mess.
No, I think that's such a good point on so many levels. I mean, I've actually been thinking about this quite a bit. People don't know me. I love Olympic track. I love to watch Olympic track, but I'm like legitimately conflicted at this point, because it feels like, well, damn, I mean, if y'all gonna do her like this, what level of, should I give you anything? And it's like, you know, okay, I'm one person, blah, 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 but even just personally, just internally, I just feel like it doesn't even feel right to be doing this. And I mean, it just on top of everything else, and I know I said this in the beginning, the very fact that they're even doing the Olympics in this context, you got the majority of people in Japan don't want it to happen. A lot of questions about COVID-19. Pretty much everyone writing about it is saying that the Prime Minister of Japan is only doing this to hope that nothing bad happens, so that he can then run on it in a snap election and say, oh, look, I did this great job by like bringing the Olympics that was canceled last year. So putting out all these people potentially at risk. You know, at the same time, they also want to pump radioactive waste into the Pacific. But not to get too far off the mark, I mean, it really just is, it's a good point about sort of how the Olympics is as a product.
Sorry about that. But one thing I have this being used. I'm certain it is, and maybe you all can check me on this. To what extent are we seeing, like we've seen historically when these events take place, all of the displacement of the poor and the selection of who are the criminals to be locked up, and is that all happening right now? And is that all being swept under the rug while people are wondering who's getting caught smoking weed and whatever else?
It's got to be. It's got to be.
I mean,
I'm actually not that aware of. I haven't been on top of it as much as I was with Brazil, but it's got to be. There's someone did a book about this. Like every single Olympics has included, some form of mass displacement. I mean, obviously, LA in '84 was notorious for that, but Millennium Park in Atlanta, same thing. So it has to be. There are all sorts of scandals flying under the radar. Some that didn't fly so much under the radar. There was the guy who was the head of the Olympic Committee who said he didn't want any women in the room. Because they will talk. I mean, that was basically what it boiled down to. It just the Olympics. What to say? I'm a fan of the Olympics. Can I switch it up
one more time? Can I ask you one more question of all of you in terms of a labor context? If there is a lockout versus a strike, and some workers are allowed in despite the lockout, while others are selectively kept out, what is the role then of the worker? Is it still the same as crossing a picket line? Man, because
theoretically, if there's a lockout and or a strike, you cross the line, you're a scab.
All right, well, then it's easy for me. Then I'm not watching. Then everybody else should stand in solidarity with her and not go. How about that?
I tell you, if the USA basketball just said, you know what, we're not going to play, she would be in the Olympics. They would just give her the gold medal without even running. I mean, it definitely, without a doubt, the rest, and there's an argument to be made for all Olympic athletes having more labor protections here. And notably enough, it was track out of the University of Oregon under Prefontaine that ended the amateur status of the Olympics. And so there've always been quite a bit of controversy over this labor status of workers and as these track stars are. And I think that's perhaps important for people to revisit. It's an individualistic sport, but for her to have no real recourse, that was also problematic to me. I was like, so there's no one, you can't take this anywhere? You can't adjudicate this? Like the whole world sounds crazy and there's just nothing you can do? I mean, it's wild.
It's also insane because I looked up like the Olympics policy on alcohol, and if you're an athlete, you can drink in the Olympic Village. Like you can bring alcohol as long as you do it in your own private room. So she did it in a state where it was legal, right? So she didn't break any laws. And the only reason that that weed is being held at something that can disqualify her is really the war on drugs. Like we can't, there's literally no other reason. Weed is not a performance enhancing drug. I've seen a lot of memes talking about they should take a couple seconds off because she was running with weed lungs. Like that's not the reality, but like I know a couple people and they can't run as fast as she can. She's here breaking records, like setting up. Like I do want to show a clip of right after well, I'll show two clips real quick. One of is of her running.
Who's going to Tokyo? We're about to find out. Women's 100 is underway. JVN Oliver, a fantastic start. She's putting the pressure on Richardson. Here comes Sha'Carri. Richardson's going to Tokyo.
Damn, she smoked everybody.
Smoked them.
She must have.
Pun intended, I guess.
It's about 6-7 strides behind out of the gate. Woo!
And then I want to show right after this, she had an interview where she spoke about her biological mother dying.
My family has kept me grounded. This year has been crazy for me. Going from just last week, losing my biological mother, and I'm still here.
What did you say? You lost your mother?
Yeah. I'm still here. Last week, finding out my biological mother passed away and still choosing to pursue my dreams, still coming out here, still making sure to make the family that I do still have on this earth proud. And the fact that nobody knows what I go through. Everybody has struggles, and I understand that. But y'all see me on this track, and y'all see the poker face I put on, but nobody but them and my coach know what I go through on a day-to-day basis, and I'm highly grateful for them. Without them, there would be no me. Without my grandmother, there would be no Sha'Carri Richardson. So
But yeah, like the fact that she lost her biological mother a week prior, you know, and then she did an interview with Good Morning, I think Good Morning Today, where she spoke about like where that's where she had apologized, and she had said something that like was really heartbreaking. She was like she had to be in front of TV, she had to be in front of the limelight, she still had to run, she couldn't hide herself, so she tried to hide her feelings. Like that is insane, and it goes back to the conversation we were having before about like even about Britney. The way that people that are in the limelight are held to a certain like they're held to certain standards that are not realistic for people, because at the end of the day, she's like she's a person. Mm-hmm. She's fast as hell, but she's a person, and like she's going through trauma. Like if this was anybody else, like
yeah. Well, Naomi Osaka, I mean, raised a similar issue, right? In terms of the tennis issue, the French Open, and the media, the way they treat people, and the way you're sort of expected to perform, you know, in front of these interviews, which, I don't know, I think anyone who's a sports fan knows. I've never felt there's a lot of value to these post-game interviews anyway, right? They just make you stand up there and say a few things. Everyone pretty much says the same thing. No one's ever going to really say anything terribly controversial because, you know, your endorsements or whatever, blah, blah, blah. Well, I guess Cristiano Ronaldo with the Coke thing. But, you know.
That was hilarious.
That was fantastic, I have to say. But only someone of that caliber could dare to slight Coke like that. Any slightly smaller player, it could have ruined your entire career to do that. So you have to be at the pinnacle of international sports stardom to make a point that is obviously true, that soda companies are basically like drug dealers. But that's the other side of it, Jared, is we're out here talking about weed, but you know, what is big sugar as an industry? And I'm not saying I don't like a sugary drink, but the reality is, I always say, people say, how did America come up? Drug dealing. I mean, the Virginia colony was not viable until they were like, we're gonna sell tobacco and get people high. Oh, wait a second, we about to get some sugar out here. I mean, they just addicted people to drugs, but they've become normalized in, you know, the fake food pyramid is okay.
No, you're right. I mean, that is funny. First of all, I can't help but all the contradictions. I'm thinking about the journalist that put the microphone in her face, and thinking about the gaggle of journalists. It's like when journalists or even academics gather at these conferences, or when they're off mic and off the record. I mean, it's debauchery. So and then they clean themselves up and run out there and stick a mic in someone's face and condemn them if they haven't, you know, comported themselves with the fake, you know, standards that are being applied. I mean, it's maddening. But again, I think if we use it as I think you've just done to pull back the veneer on what's really going on here, that if you can pump sugar, when Anthony Bourdain, you know, I remember one thing he said before he died was that he said when he thinks about the world that would allow for the imposition of processed foods, it would drive him into deep depression. I mean, if you think about the idea of what's behind a Coca-Cola, you know, before you get to the liquid in the bottle, you know, they've already been condemned for labor practices, supporting, I mean, people being killed in their bottling plants. I mean, it's all never mind the health imposition, you know, stealing water for their water. I mean, all kinds of shady stuff that goes on. And then we get to the sugary. And of course we like it, the same reason why cocaine is of a drug. People do smoke marijuana. The drugs work. The sugar works. The cheese works. I mean, all of these things hit us like heroin. You know, I mean, it's crazy. So of course people are going to, and then when they're oppressed and suppressed and suffering and going through, you know, trauma, they're going to go and revisit them. And then here comes the Olympics to punish them for it. I mean, it's crazy. And then we're going to be asked for a gold medal. And when the U.S. starts calculating their summer medal totals, we're supposed to, man, I can't get with it. No offense to the personal
America's
athletes,
back.
But
we got a lot of gold medals. No masks, no gold. We just gold medals, get the masks off, get back in the club, watch the movies. We're coming back. Shots in arms, as Biden said. Shots in arms.
Oh, man.
No, but
wow.
The rules are the rules thing that Biden said, it sounds like very much like China has to comply because the rule of law and order, right?
Yeah.
Like that's what that sounds like to me. It's like who
Well, what is it that Malcolm X said? You can tell me, Jared. We know what he means when he says white. He means I'm boss.
Boss.
That's how I felt when I heard Biden just kind of ambling over from whenever, you know, like it looked like he was in the Cracker Barrel gift shop, just ambling over, talking about, oh, the rules are the rules.
I mean, look, it's
Rules
a
are the
good
rules.
thing. It's a good thing. It's a good thing that logic doesn't apply to his son.
I'm about to say that. He got to say that to Hunter.
Yo,
If somebody need to hear the rules of the rules, it's Hunter.
Right?
I mean,
How did
it's
I forget
crazy.
that
You know, I have to
hypocrisy? That's a
say,
good
you know,
one.
I like Mark Lamont Hill. You know, I'm a fan of Mark, but I was definitely upset with him when he did a little monologue about Republicans saying, why does no one care about Hunter Biden? He's like, because it's Hunter Biden. Who cares? I was reading some of what this dude was saying. Some of these racist texts and other, they should make a bigger deal out of this. You're telling me that this is just a dude who's making millions of dollars off of his father, no skills at all, like the worst of America.
Right.
And then he's in all of his private things saying racist stuff about black people, racist stuff about Asian women. I do want to see people make a big deal out of that. I
That's
do
American
think
values,
Biden should have to answer for that. You can't be up here talking about, oh, my family is so great, da-da-da-da-da, and I'm going to be against racism. I'm for Black Lives Matter, blah, blah, blah. I'm going to heal the country. And your son seems to be extremely comfortable with racism. I would like to know what you make of that contradiction. But you know.
And again, the rules don't apply to his son. Like, how come Joe Biden's not telling his son, hey, Hunter, the rules are the rules? It's like it's this logic only applies. I mean, it's so emblematic of America.
Yeah, it is.
Rich
That's still I have to say is
boy
like
can get away with whatever he wants, but you know,
he really can get away.
Black girl
His story
whose
of the
mother died
Navy
can't
is still
smoke
one of
weed.
the best stories I've ever heard. That he would just went out of the bar and was smoking a cigarette with the guy. And then as he was driving home, realized that it wasn't just a cigarette, that perhaps there'd been some cocaine in there. And he just accidentally tested positive the next day. And the Navy was actually wrong for kicking him out. And I was like, does anyone believe that? Really?
I mean,
But they put him
who
on stage
hasn't
at the
accidentally
DNC. They gave
smoked
him more
crack?
time than Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez at the DNC.
Hey, look,
and she's an elected Democratic official.
When I was in the Navy and my number came up to drop by the urinalysis test, I started coming up with those stories too. I had them all already too. I didn't know what was in the cigarette, boss. I didn't know what was. It was just the best cigarette I ever smoked in my life. It was crazy good, and I just thought it was, you know.
He would just be praying on it like that.
I mean, I get it. I mean, but that's. You know, and look, to your both of your points. I mean, all three of your points. When the hypocrisy of he'll drag Hunter's experience, or I mean Bo's experience. He'll drag the death of his one son, right, when necessary, but then put the living one, safely in a corner and say, no, don't focus on what my living one is doing. Focus on what my dead one is doing, or what isn't doing, so that I can use his death for my own career.
Everybody has a favorite son. Everybody has a favorite son.
Well, we're gonna leave it there.
Oh, damn.
I just want to. All I'm gonna say is this.
Thank you, Juan. Free Juan.
Free Juan. If you're watching on YouTube or anywhere, check out Black Power Media. A bunch of great shows, including the Remix Morning Show, which is extremely funny. I just have to say, Jared. Hey, really appreciate you as always joining us here on Breakthrough News.
No, it's always a pleasure. Renai, it's good to catch up with you as well. Juan, good luck behind that glass, my man. Peace, everybody.